Welcome to Bookswell Intersections. I'm your host, Cody Sisco. My guest today is Lynne Thompson, poet, laureate for the city of Los Angeles starting in 2021. Welcome, Lynne.
And thank you for having me. It's delightful to be here.
So I want to give our audience a little bit of context, and then I want to talk about your book, Blue on a Blue Palette. So, Lynne, you have 4 collections of poetry. Blue on a Blue Palette is your most recent, published in April 2024 by BOA Editions Limited. Your other 3 collections of poetry, Beg No Pardon, Start with a Small Guitar, and Fretwork, which was the winner of the 2019 Marsh Hawk Poetry Prize. An attorney by training, and I want to ask you a question about that in a bit.
Sure.
With a JD from Southwestern Law School, Thompson sits on the boards of Cave Canem, the Poetry Foundation, and the Los Angeles Review of Books. In June 2022, she completed her 4-year service as chair of the Board of Trustees at Scripps College, her alma mater. A poet who can get things done and lead.
Well, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So it's been a couple months. BOA published your book of poetry, Blue on a Blue Palette, and I was looking through kind of the others in the series, and Lucille Clifton's name kept coming up again and again, and I was wondering kind of how it feels to be part of this like illustrious group of poets.
It is the honor of my life to be published by the same press that has published so many of her books, for which they have a series named Blessing the Boats. It feels like that lineage goes on, and I had the honor to meet her on a couple of occasions. And in addition to being an amazing poet, she was just a down-to-earth, funny, kind person. And so I'm honored to be part of the press that her books are listed among.
It feels, while reading your poetry, it felt to me like there was a conversation happening between both your poems and other poets' poems, but also the world and the many different sensations and happenings that you've experienced. So I wanted to start our conversation about kind of how you decide which parts of your experience to bring into your poems and how inspiration strikes you.
I try to be as open to inspiration as I can be, and that includes overhearing snippets of conversation, reading the billboards at bus stops. Anything really is fodder. And frequently I find in talking with friends or other poets who may also be friends, that we as human beings have universal experiences. They're not identical experiences, but we can relate to each other in childhood experiences, and not everything, but in many things. And so I draw upon that to give a personal lens to what may be seen as a worldwide experience, when in fact, maybe it's something we've experienced in our own backyard, either factually or metaphorically.
There was one poem that took me so specifically to a place, I have to ask if it's based on kind of a memory or experience you had. And that was mosquitoes consider tourists who come to Tahiti.
That is absolutely a true story. I will never return to Tahiti because the mosquitoes terrorized me. And I really do have an allergy, not just the regular bite, but I also have an allergy to mosquitoes. And so I have to be so careful if I go any place that I think there might be mosquitoes. And I decided I needed to memorialize that in a poem, but I knew I would be very biased. So I decided to give the mosquitoes their own voice.
It had this quality of a wry twist, which I really, really enjoyed. And I found, there were threads of that throughout the collection. And I was always kind of keeping my eyes open for, is this a serious one, or is Lynne going to add in kind of that flavor?
And I do want to add that I was trying, perhaps too subtly or not so subtly, to say that we as humans travel to places and then expect the places to adapt to us, instead of understanding you come to these places the way that they are and you need to adapt to them or not. but you can't be angry because there are mosquitoes in Tahiti. I mean, that's just the way it is. So I also wanted to get that kind of a dig in there as well.
Yeah. So place comes into your poems a lot. I feel like, there is a version of reading through these poems that's almost a travel log, and one of the places that's featured is Los Angeles from a variety of kind of angles and perspectives. There's this vivid image in red jasper of the moon, and how kind of the heartbeat of LA stops when the moon rises and everyone can see it, from their cars or wherever they are in their neighborhoods. I don't want to ask you to read that one specifically. I would love to have you read a couple poems in a minute, but you have a poem about Brea, Los Volcanes de Brea, Lay of a Lie, which is this beautiful kind of it almost feels like you're revolving around the ideas of palm trees and migration and people, and how we become a place, and the ways of remembering women, which I know you talked to Lynne George about in her interview about how women are misremembered.
Yes.
These poems, they're wonderful reflections of so many different aspects of Los Angeles, and I just wonder, is there something about this place that that makes you want to surprise the audience?
Yes, I'm a native Angelino, and the more I write about Los Angeles, it makes me read more about Los Angeles and learn more, even though I've lived here all my life. And I think it's very easy to stereotype the city, as maybe with many cities, just based on maybe what you see in a movie or a snippet from a book. But I'm trying to get at some of the stories that aren't told as much. I have a real interest in that, as many writers do. And so, for example, the one about the palm trees. So we're known for our ubiquitous palm trees. Well, with one exception, they're not native. They were brought here to create a look and a kind of this Italianate vision that someone had of what Los Angeles should look like. And they have a 100-year lifespan. And so they're now starting to die off. And, I just wanted to talk about that, not linger on it a long time. It's a short poem, but to talk about it a little bit in terms of how we have created this myth of Los Angeles. And the palm trees are part of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are there myths that you want to create?
Oh, now that's a very good question. Probably not. I'm probably more interested in debunking myths and how we think about our city and our state. California is larger than some countries, and there are many stories about it that, if you dig a little deeper into what is the true story, which is why I wrote Los Volcanes de Brea, because we know the tar pits. It's a great site to take the kids on school trips on the surface. But what do we know about the history of it? What Los Angeles was like 100 years ago, 150 years ago, before it was an incorporated city. So I think plenty of people are making up myths. I'm more interested in getting to the heart of the myths we already have, which are numerous.
I so much appreciate the layers and the feeling of delving into your intentions for each poem, which so for example, like Shasta and Echo, it's about a mountain that we call Shasta, but it also has a native name.
Exactly. And that was a fun poem to write. And I don't think I've said this in any other interview. I never read it because the native name is one that's difficult for me to pronounce. So I've done the Google pronunciation app, and it does tell you the pronunciation. But of course, when I get to the word, I invariably stop and stumble, and I don't want to embarrass myself or cause angst to the indigenous community. I really want to enshrine this name. So I hope that people will enjoy it in the book and understand why I'm not reading it.
I love that. There's an element to history and how you excavate or bring us into the different layers of history, and I also appreciate that when you're writing about say the sort of like contemporary Black American experience and how history is seen. History is still happening.
Yes.
We are, experiencing it all the time, and this happens to be maybe a week where Black Americans can be hopeful
Yes.
and excited,
Yes.
and feeling maybe a little blue,
Yes. Yes.
but also, it's within the context of like things still are difficult and not as we would want them. But how, I'm thinking in particular about a rage on, and I'm going to say this wrong, Berbis.
Berbice.
Berbice. And our ancestors enslaved once said Juneteenth would never be, and dirge for murdered Black girls. What is how do you approach, what tell me more about, how you do these poems.
So if I had known myself better when I went to college, I probably would have been a history major, because I really do love history a lot. To understand, how did we get to this point, any given point, politically, culturally, racially, whatever the case may be. And we are living in a time, unfortunately, where books are being banned. You can't teach Black history or Hispanic history. You can't say gay. You can't. And so it seems to me as a writer it's important to rescue these stories. And often, as the saying goes, to name names, because it's easy to forget or to have the figurehead of Emmett Till, for example, which was horrific, but he's not the only one. So by only saying Emmett Till, it seems to me that an audience can be lulled into thinking, well, that was an exception. That was not an exception. When the Asian women were killed in Florida, maybe 2 or 3 years ago now, I think 13 of them. Oh, that was an exception. That's not true. Asian American women have been exploited and gone missing, murdered for a long time. So if we don't tell those stories, they do become lost. So I think it's important for me as a poet to find ways to use that genre to add to the chorus that wants to say these people's names over and over, and to ensure that the stories are not forgotten.
I love the idea of rescuing from, say, erasure or being overlooked.
Exactly.
Or unknown. Maybe shifting gears to now a slightly lighter topic. It brought a smile to my face. I was nearing the end of the book, and I read the poem you wrote directly to Peter J. Harris.
Yes.
And it felt just like, you were having this conversation like so intimately, that we, as readers get to benefit from this kind of like mutual respect and interplay and creative inspiration back and forth. You had to write that poem, huh?
I absolutely had to write that poem. Peter had read a praise poem. I forget what the reading was, although I think it may have been associated somehow with your series that you had at one time in West Hollywood. In any event, I heard the poem and I thought, how come I haven't written a praise poem? There are things that I can give praise for. And I wanted to give him a shout out. Peter has a project called the Black Man of Happiness Project, because he is tired of Black men being thought of as so, tragically unhappy. No, we are happy as people, and Black men as well as any other group of people. So I wanted to give him that shout out, but I also wanted to think about my own praise song.
Have you read that when he was in the audience yet.
I think he's living in Florida now, so I'm trying to remember if I read it. I think I did read it when he was in the audience. And,
Amazing.
Peter's very humble and self-effacing and was very surprised, but he was pleased.
I love that. I don't want to end a conversation with you without first kind of talking a bit about form and how you approach form, what forms you love, why you use them. What is it? What does it bring? What would you be missing without a focus on form when writing poetry?
Well, a couple of thoughts. My initial approach to form was not to write in form because I was afraid of it. I don't have an MFA, so I didn't go through a formal program, and that was part of the program to talk about form and prosody and meter and all of that. I had to figure that out with the help of others on my own. But I was scared of form, and then one day I woke up and I wasn't scared of form anymore and decided that I would try the villanelles, the pantoums, the sonnets. But I also became interested, spurred on by Terence Hayes's Golden Shovel, by a number of created forms, to start to make my own forms, which is the poem that, frankly, when I consider my body, is a cento, Italian for patchwork or quilt, braiding lines of Diane Seuss and Terence Hayes. I have another poem that isn't in the book that I wrote for Suzanne Lummis, who's a local Los Angeles poet, which is a sestina, but it's also written in the form of a sestina, but it's also a cento. So it takes lines from one of her books and puts them into the cento form, but also it's a pantoum, so I call it a centum. So, yeah, I'm a puzzle lover. So for me, those forms in some ways work like puzzles when you have to meet the requirements, and I also like to break those requirements where I can. I also love, and I have a few in the poem Abecedarians, which simply means that a poem is 26 line, and each line begins with a successive letter of the alphabet A through Z. I read one the other day that's a double abecedarian, so it's A through Z on the left margin and Z through A on the right margin. So one day I will try that, but I haven't done that yet.
That sounds like a puzzle for sure.
It's a puzzle for sure.
And those, I don't know if it's a villanelle or a pantoum. I have my handbook of poetic forms over here that I did not crack open because I wanted to enjoy the poems without analyzing them in that way.
Sure.
But when a line comes back again in a different context and is repeated kind of and twisted.
Yes, yes, that's the villanelle most likely. The pantoum does it as well. Both the pantoum and the villanelle have repeating lines, but in slightly different ways.
I love that feeling of kind of recurrence, but also change at
Yes.
the same time.
Yes.
Are there? We haven't really talked about one of the main themes in your book, which is sort of the circumstance of womanhood, and
Yes.
threaded throughout. It's both in terms of how women are celebrated and elevated and powerful and multifaceted, but then also denigrated, harmed, murdered, etc.
You hit it on the head. That's exactly what I wanted to do.
Is there one poem that you would say is the one you feel like you really kind of captured that combination?
I would have to say no, because there are so many aspects to the stories of women, as opposed to, and of course, we're living in a political time where apparently if you're a woman without children, that's a problem in our political arena for some folks. I'm very irritable about that. And it's hard to tell this story in one poem. I suppose if I had written an epic, Gilgamesh or something, maybe, but no, there are different poems that talk about our sexuality, that talk about aging, that talk about lost love, that talk about women in a historical context. So I can't say that there's one poem. I think the ways of remembering women um, was one where I was really trying to bring it together as much as I could. Our history,
Mm.
um, the way that we're forgotten, we're in the news and very celebrated in some cases, and but with misinformation, or we were tangential to the news in the case of Betty Nunez. Um, and I have a line where I say there are reasons for that, and we know the reasons are sexism, racism, all the isms,
Mm.
misogyny, etc. So um, that gets to the heart of a lot of what I'm saying, but it doesn't say, for example, anything that I refer to in the poem "A Woman's Body Aging," because that's a whole nother topic about women and how we're seen in terms of our bodies, particularly as we get older. Something I'm
That
very familiar with.
if I'm remembering that poem correctly, there's a repetition of kisses.
Yes,
Kisses
yes.
as a form of love of the body, even when the
Yes, and
body changes.
I wanted to self celebrate in that poem.
Hmm.
I really wanted to be able to say, okay, I don't know what anybody else thinks, but I love my body. And yes, it's getting older and, not what it was, but nevertheless, I love it.
I have to say, Among Peaches felt like the most. It was like an erotic poem that like a horny teenager couldn't write because it had the benefit of wisdom and nostalgia and memory, but still that kind of fire burning of
I'm so
desire.
glad that you said that because that's exactly what I was going after with that poem. I had read an article, two things happened. I'd read an article um, indicating that women over 50 no longer had a libido. And I thought to myself, I don't know what women you know, but that's not the women I know. Coupled with being in a supermarket, in an actual supermarket, and seeing a man and woman come out of what I knew was the bathroom area looking quite satisfied with themselves and one another. And I thought, what have they been up to? So I just put those two ideas together to say, listen, and this was a couple of, 50s, maybe 60s, I don't know. But they looked very happy. And so
Yeah.
the imagination ran over time and put those two ideas together to say, listen, I don't care how old you are. Your age does not prevent you from wanting whatever it is that you want. In this case, your sexuality.
Exactly. Uh, One more kind of area I wanted to delve into. It feels like there was like maybe a selection of poems that are a bit more weighty in terms of like an author or poet confronting, say, mortality, legacy, those types of things. Self portrait without contact lenses,
Yeah.
bells, and Langston won't stay in his grave felt like maybe a little bit of philosophizing about kind of how things change.
Yeah. I guess those are my do not go into the good. I'm butchering the poem. I'm trying to remember, but essentially, don't give up easily.
Yeah.
Um, but
Don't go
except don't go
quietly.
quiet into that good night. That's exactly it, I think.
I think.
But also accept the fact that our bodies do change, we do age, and we will die. And that's a difficult thing for anybody to face at any time in their life. But face it, we must, but not until we've done absolutely everything we could to avoid it. So,
So maybe to wrap this up, I just want to sort of point out how much you have created the kind of the or led the organizations that help create and sustain literary culture. We have the LA Review of Books, Cave Canem, Poetry Foundation. Why take on that responsibility and burden? What do you see as the importance of moving in those spheres and getting stuff done?
I am very committed to being the best poetry citizen that I can be. And that means that it's not all about me and my poems. It's about the larger poetry community. And I'm often asked whether I bring my lawyer background to my poems. And I don't bring it specifically to the poems, but I have a skill set by virtue of being a lawyer that is useful on boards as they try to plan how they want to go forward, what kind of programming, what kind of funding, what are their goals and policies. And so, to the extent I have that skill set and people find it useful, I'm anxious to give it in any way that is meaningful for those organizations. So I think everybody has a particular skill set that is beyond them writing their individual poems. And for me, a good poetry citizen uses those skill sets when the opportunities arise.
Thank you for giving back to the community, all your skills, and thank you for giving us this wonderful book, Blue on a Blue Palette.
And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
A confluence of women for Ida Perry. And always the sense we've assembled ourselves as barmaids or burdens of proof, courtesans or drama in the style of all's well that ends, as long as it doesn't end in fine print. You might suspect us, ordinary as gabardine, and, of course, you are right, hell-bent as we are and irked at our own recidivism, we Jezebels on the loose, both kenophobes and kerosene, but lastly, or mostly so, we are fearless, like to mosey with a fret of fierce sisters who've been nearly always misunderstood, or worse, understood as reclining on palanquins for others' pleasure when, in our quiescent moments, we enjoy that leisure as our own right to self-centered satisfaction, the right to our own temerity. Even a carpetbagger can't sneer at any undertaking we women might fashion for ourselves, vigorous as we are, quick to whistle while drowning, but not to worry. We're xerophytic and not so easily lost as a yacht, its tiny flags flailing, the sea the color of zirconium or some other form of divination. Seeking paradise. Don't tell me how I came to be born by a river. Instead, won't you bring me honeysuckle and applause of Mexican marigolds? Tell me how stardust bequeaths its anthems and will not die, so you can bring me a rebanado de cielo that stopped its weeping. Tell me Sam Cooke had it right singing "A change is gonna come," but do not tell me about a child who crossed the Rio Grande to taste U.S., but who's been lost to her mother, doesn't know when she will eat again. Don't you know this girl will remember and then, without warning, kill you as you sleep between your twisted sheets? I wish you would bring us jalapenos baked into sweet cornbread, and with it, some green tomatoes, capers, a subtle casamadero. Won't you bring us memories of a dog, a ball, or all of Saturday to do what children want Saturday to do? Why can't you be kind? Why won't you in paradise us? Langston won't stay in his grave. Calls me rose of neon darkness, calls himself early blue evening, black smoke of sound, says we are related, you and I, reminds me we are wandering in the dusk, our faces a chocolate bar, facing the night of two moons. And though I'm a lonely little question mark, he laughs. Life is for the living with gypsies and sailors. Till the old junk man death plants your feet in the cool swamp mud, shake your brown toes, honey. Wander through this living world. Get out the lunchbox of your dreams. Stay awake all night with loving or be a woman in the doorway. Death don't ring no doorbells or say here is that sleeping place as if it were some noble thing. Think how thin and sharp the moon is tonight. Don't mind dying, veiling what darkness hides. Haunt like mystery, like a naked bone in gumbo. Nod at the sun.